Hi Ed. I was thinking between compiling that vid for you and coming outside, I was thinking there's probably a couple of areas that cause us difficulty. Whenever I play with you, there's a lot of variety off the tee, there's a lot of inconsistency off the tee in terms of quality of contact and also dispersion. So, you know, driving was and generally when I've played with you still a bit of an issue. I think in terms of creating energy, no worries at all, but it's neatly getting the middle of the club through the ball and getting the angles right to promote flight. And I think what I would say is having a look at your driving separately. We obviously need to make sure that we've got a consistent way to relate the club well to the target in terms of its dynamic relationship with the target, so it's got the right amount of loft to flight the ball and spin the ball properly, but also the face and path interact well together and the whole club interacts well with the target. So, you know, make sure the club is, so to speak, looking at the target when you strike as much as possible. So probably keep that separate somewhat, and when you show me some driver footage, let's look for any anomalies there. But again in the past, we've made sure, done quite a lot of work on making sure you don't sort of move into this territory, which with an iron club you can do. We know the reasons why, that's okay. At the moment, I think whether we're conscious of it or not, whether we've articulated it or not, we generally tend to plump for the same swing for both styles of shot, irons and woods. So obviously today I'm going to focus on just reflecting on the iron one with you. But I think also when I think about your iron shots and your approach play, and I think about your chipping, I think about those two things as there seems to be a lot of interaction with the ground. You know, your club is almost, a lot of the time, most rounds that I've played with you, there's some shots where the club has entered the ground, has interacted with the ground quite heavily before it gets anywhere near the ball. Now, of course, again, just to tie that in with how we have to be conscious that with your metal woods, if we hit downwards, we get a much less launch angle and we get much higher spin, which, you know, means for a really low fizzy shot, and any misappropriation of club face and path turns into a lot of spin, hooks and slices and stuff. So the steepness on the long clubs tends to kill you. Hence we've try to move away from that and stabilize things a little bit. And I think in the garden setting, you seem to produce numbers that are money. And then we go out in the golf course setting and we just fluctuate a little bit. Maybe that's a byproduct of picking up clubs and putting them down and having long spaces between tee shots and things like that. So we have to kind of keep that on the back burner, I would say, probably discuss that in more detail in due course. But I think obviously I'll start reflecting on your iron swing in just a second and try and keep with the ethos of this video. But yeah, you're chipping. I'd like some video on that. I'd like to see some images of you hitting chip shots and see whether we can make sure we keep on top of that and keep that tidy, because yeah, we need to make good contact for distance control and obviously for keeping the number of shots down. So those are the main things that when I think about whenever we play over the years. Errantness off the tee, mishits, usually fat shots on approach, and heavy shots, fat shots, and possibly the odd thin shot as well. But really that, all rotates around, excuse the pun, the altitude of your club. You know, if this central point in your upper body has any whiff of having to move up and downwards or moves deliberately up and downwards to try to fulfill some element of the swing, that directly affects the low point in your swing. So if I keep a fixed point here, the lowest point my club can ever get is vertically below that fixed point. That fixed point exists inside your body. And really, to get to brass tacks, no amount of rotation will move that point towards the ground. No amount. So we can rotate this way and that way, and of itself, you can see my head against the fence there. I keep my height no matter how much I rotate. So rotating is never going to be the enemy. We're never going to vilify that. So succinctly, about as succinctly as I can imagine, if I stand sideways onto the camera and I put my center of gravity, which is sort of somewhere between visually the back of my armpits, somewhere between my shoulders, if I tip forwards, then that point is vertically out beyond my knees and out sort of vertically above my toes, and my legs straighten possibly. Now, to counter that, I can soften my knees and I can move my weight backwards and upwards, we're looking for some parity there really, where the back of the armpits are sort of either vertically above your kneecaps or just out and beyond. So I think that's important, because if we get too far this way, we can gain and lose height by necessity to try to keep our weight grounded and balanced. So we want to avoid anything that precipitates that, because that's really subconscious. So unconscious, my balance is working right now as I'm standing in front of you, and yours will be too if you're standing up, keeping you upright. It just does that the whole time. So we don't want to get like super stooped and then loads of knee bend, particularly because knee bend means you limit rotation, and that will just kind of hemorrhage power, for example, and just reduce mobility. So too wide a stance, too narrow a stance. Narrow is fine if you're chipping. Of course, you don't need much rotation because you don't need much power, but you don't want too wide, too much knee flex, or too straight knees. Those will inhibit rotation, so we don't want those at all. So that's the only thing from down the line, just trying to maybe a little bit taller, possibly shaft angle would be a little bit steeper, but that's a byproduct of just centering your weight a little bit more. But you're strong, so if we can channel all of that into your shots, then I don't see anything negative. You can play from a position of being slightly off balance and still stay upright, I'm sure, which is again part of strength. Might hide some of the fact that your centre might move up and down a little bit. I don't see much evidence for that in the video there, but again, it's just a thought that we need to keep on top of. I think from in front, that front-on view, nice to see. Okay, although you could, with an iron, move into this territory, and with a lofted club, with a forward-leaning shaft by design, you could hit downwards onto the ball. But again, even then, if you're hitting a downward angle of approach a few degrees, you still don't need to interact with the turf quite so heavily. Interaction with the turf will come when this centre point moves down. Now, again, the only real sort of ugly or, fault-looking thing in your swing would be that as you swing forwards, that left arm moves up the side of your body and around and behind you. So we sort of see kind of that happen. The shoulders sort of almost stall for a little bit, move up, and that left arm. Now, if this was moving towards the ground, if your centre of gravity was moving towards the ground, it would necessitate this getting shorter. Because, of course, if the centre point in my swing is moving downwards and my lever stays the same length, my club is going to be in the ground. It's going to visit the ground, it's going to visit the ground back here somewhere and be at its low point, well below the ground. If I'm fortunate, it might bounce off the ground and stop digging, but by that time the damage is done. So again, when this rotation stalls and this left arm starts to kind of disappear behind you a little bit, so from down the line looks a little bit more like it pops out this way, all right, then all I think we've got to work on is just keeping our rotation continuous and going and going and going and going. Just trying to measure a place where we can get our left shoulder as far away from the ball as possible at the same time as reaching, the low point. So the low point there. If I move upwards here, then of course the altitude of my club rises up off the ground. All right. If I move downwards, the altitude lowers. So I would recommend this. What I want you to do, and I didn't prepare properly for this, I've just realised, what I want you to do is get the longest tee peg that you can, put it in the ground, all right, and I want you to push it into the ground so it's just maybe a centimetre. If it's like a 6 centimetre long golf tee, just push the first centimetre into the ground or into the mat if it will permit, or fabricate something like one of those rubber tees that you get at the driving range. You might have to buy one that's reasonably sturdy, that's got some sort of, is in the ground somewhat. But what I'd like you to do is set up to it. Try and feel for your balance. Set up to it so the low point in your swing is theoretically and in practice. You can see my club is mimicking the idea of that ball being off the tee. That ball being very, very high up on a stupendously high tee. And I want you to practice seeing if you can hit that ball off the top of that peg without disturbing the peg. So a little trick that I used to do as a kid, I've probably bored you with this before, but I used to hit golf balls off the top of Coke cans, at the driving range at Wickham Heights, just for a giggle. To see if it could be done as much as anything. It'd probably be easier if you put a little bit of water or a bit of Coke is still in the can, because it's a little bit more weighty and the cans are so thin these days. But the point I'm really trying to make is that a great indicator that you're controlling the altitude of your club from your centre, if you started with the club, say 6 or 8 centimetres off the ground addressing the back of the ball, and your weight, for example, was distributed out over your toes, your body's going to pick itself up, and then on the way back forward you'd probably only catch the top hemisphere of the ball, or you might miss the ball altogether because your body stood up. You haven't necessarily noticed that. Similarly, if we start with the club 8 centimetres or so off the ground, so addressing the ball that's sitting on that high imaginary tee peg that I've got here, if we were stood a little bit upright and our body moved forwards to become more dynamic, and as you start towards the shot, your low point is inevitably going to be lower. So controlling that sensation of your low point versus the ground is going to run throughout your game. Your metalwoods don't need to interact with the ground at all, obviously, and yet we do get quite a lot of interaction with the ground. Your irons don't need to interact with the ground, but from time to time I can remember at Finca a couple of shots from the fairway where you'd hit the ground heavily before the ball and the ball would flump forwards a few yards. And, you know, soul crushing as that is, it's just a matter of, had your club not engaged with the ground, had your swing not engaged with the ground, we could have clipped the ball off the top and carried on our merry way. And the same would be true of your chipping. So I think we've probably got to focus in on that. I think we've got to say, look, clubs don't interact with the ground when your centre point, your centre of gravity, isn't getting nearer to or isn't nearer to the ground than you measured when you started. So if the club's touching the ground in this instance, I'm not going to take a divot unless my swing moves towards the ground. That's the middle of my swing moves towards the ground. Anything else is secondary or tertiary or just noise, all right, at the moment for us. All right, but try that little drill, really high tee peg, try and measure it up, find your center, and just get used to the idea that you're making sure when you make a swing, you're trying to clip that ball clean off the top of that tee without disturbing that tee. Make a drill of it, make an exercise of it, make it fun, and make it something that you can do that will test your ability to control that element of your swing, because we've got a track record for controlling every other element of your swing that I can see. So without it, we are fluctuating a little bit, and I just feel like it sort of struck me when I was contemplating what I was going to say to you, that it's been happening for too long, quite frankly, and we need to get to the nub, the locus, the focus of where and why that's happening, and get control over that, and start to make some inroads, even if we don't get to play and practice on a daily basis, and keep on top of it that way. You know, I think your instincts would sort that out but if we can put your attention on it, we should be fine in that respect. Okay, so set up that little drill. Let me know how you get on. You can even film yourself doing it. But again, if you can clip a ball off the top of a tee peg without disturbing the tee, it suggests that your low point isn't interacting with the ground. It certainly suggests that, especially if your numbers are good, decent. You know, of course, you could theoretically hit downwards on it, nobble it off the tee, miraculously not disturb the tee, and still launch quite low. And the same would be true if the ball's teed up. You could hang back behind it, hit it on the up, nip it off the top of the tee that way. But I think, you know, it's not a perfect exercise, but I think it's pretty good for figuring out how not to have your club interact with the ground excessively across the board, at least for now. Have a go at it and let me know, give me some pushback, okay? All right, lecture over. Catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye.